Welcome. Bienvenidos. My name is Selena Alvarez, and I am the executive director of this most amazing place we call Housing Works. Just over 1 year ago, the world moved into a new way of being. COVID-19 arrived at our doorstep and in many ways shook us to our core. Confusion, uncertainty, social distancing, masking, isolation, heartache, and loss. Life before the pandemic has become a mere memory of what once was. Yet, communities, cities, villages, comunidades, ciudades, pueblos, near and far, they pulled together in remarkable ways, which proved that, in fact, we could hold true the idea of showing up for one another, rebirthing a sense of humanity that was quickly fading. Then we froze with disbelief with the brutal murder of George Floyd taking place right before our very eyes. Let us not forget the lives lost prior and those who came after. What we witnessed with the uprising and solidarity movements across the globe was Black people and other people of color rising up, no longer remaining silent about the overwhelming grief spilling over like rhyolitic magma type lava. A moment in time now offering an historical opportunity to confront this long felt heartache. A time to usher in a new era of revolutionary leadership. Imagining ourselves as the game changers confronting the root issues of homelessness, addiction, poverty, disenfranchisement, and health and wage disparities. Over the past year, the Housing Works team has stayed the course on the front line through it all. We housed nearly 100 people, taking them off the streets and into housing, while over 500 people remain successfully housed. But what happens when a person who has been on the streets finally makes it in, gets their keys, and closes that door? What's next? Well, that's why we're here today, to tell you just what it takes to make housing work. It is my pleasure to welcome you, our steadfast supporters, to our 18th annual fundraising event, How Housing Works. That's the story we're telling tonight as we take a deep dive into Los Angeles's unprecedented homeless crises and how we move beyond short-term approaches to long-term solutions that keep people housed for good. We hope you will consider a contribution to our efforts and impact the work we create each day in the lives of the more than 600 people for whom we create access to safe, decent, affordable housing with wholeness, uniqueness, and belonging. This year, we have 3 honorees. We have a Housing Works Hero, the Tom McGinnis Community Leadership Award, and the Truth Teller Award. Hollywood Food Coalition is the 2021 Housing Works Hero Award. This year, we're honoring the Los Angeles Economic Roundtable as our Tom McGinnis Community Leadership Award, or the Systems Changers Award, as we reference it. And also, we'll be talking to Dr. Alisa Orduña as she shares with us her wisdom, which will help you better understand why she has been selected as this year's 2021 Truth Teller Award here at Housing Works. We have a wonderful event lined up for you tonight. So grab your snacks, get comfy, and help me welcome the Housing Works food delivery team, Michael and Duran.
In March, when we were faced with the Safer at Home order, Housing Works began to reimagine the ways in which we could safely provide services working remotely with limited fieldwork. After calling to check in on hundreds of our participants in the first 2 weeks, it was clear we needed to show up in new ways for the people we serve. Based on a survey of our participants, we found that over half are food insecure and over a quarter have very low food insecurity, meaning they experience hunger without access to food several times a month.
Our participants were also impacted by the lack of reliable transportation they could safely use. Our staff was no longer able to transport participants directly to lease signings, shelters, doctor's appointments, and other necessary appointments. Housing Works continues to show up for our participants by arranging Lyft rides to ensure they can safely travel despite any underlying conditions or COVID-related risk factors.
Throughout the pandemic, we've continued to deliver sack lunches and supplemental groceries each week to our most vulnerable participants who often can't leave their home or don't have the income to afford these meals and groceries. This extra support during trying times is much appreciated by participants and gives us an extra chance to check in and make sure we're supporting them in all ways in which they need. We're asking if you'll consider making a donation to Housing Works to support this crucial work. Access to food is just as important to our community's health as safe, stable housing and quality health care. In a time where our food banks are impacted by growing economic insecurity, our community continues to need consistent access to good food well beyond the throes of this pandemic. We appreciate any amount you can give, and thank you from everyone at Housing Works.
2003 was the year Housing Works was born. This year, we celebrate 18 years of making a difference in the lives of the people we serve. Today, we have nearly 41 employees who serve almost 700 people at any given time. Just over 600 of those individuals are living in permanent supportive housing throughout Los Angeles. We cannot do this alone. As we dive into telling the story about how housing works, I'd like to tell you about a remarkable partner we have coordinated efforts with over the past year. Hollywood Food Coalition, this year's recipient of the Housing Works Hero Award. The Housing Works Hero Award goes to individuals who have made significant, genuinely heroic contributions of time, skill, and talent. Hollywood Food Coalition has provided hunger relief to unhoused and food insecure neighbors throughout hot, high-quality meals served every single night of the year without fail since 1987. Hollywood Food Coalition's mission is to feed and serve the immediate needs of the hungry every night of the year so they can build better lives. Sherry Bonanno is the executive director of Hollywood Food Coalition, and she is here with us today to share their story. Welcome, Sherry Bonanno.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And also joining us is Housing Works' very own superstar and director of programs, Robert Morrison. Robert, last March, the world entered into a new way of being as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Take us back to last March.
Thank you, Selena, and thank you, Sherry, for being here. I think last March, all of us may remember, I think on March 13th, there was a national emergency that was declared related to the COVID-19 pandemic. We closed early that day and sent all of our staff home, and I left one of our permanent supportive housing projects where we had watched the declaration with some of our staff and participants to go straight to the grocery store. And of course, what did I find there? Not very much. There wasn't a lot in the grocery store. Couldn't even find peanut butter. That next week, we started calling all of our participants on the phone and asking them, what is it that you need? What's going on for you? And the number one thing that came back, besides toilet paper, was food. Housing Works participants experience disability at a higher rate than the average population. People who have been homeless or are homeless experience food insecurity at higher rates than the average population. And so we started to find partners as quickly as we could that could help us get food to our participants. And we started to recruit volunteers to deliver food to our participants in their homes. For years before the pandemic, we had relied upon food banks to help our participants get food, but all of these emergency systems were heavily impacted during the beginning of the pandemic. So we partnered with providers like the Hollywood Food Coalition, who we found in the next couple of weeks. And throughout the pandemic, we're able to connect with them to food for our participants, both in terms of donations from different entities and organizations that they had found, and also through coordinating a weekly prepared meal delivery for our participants. So we would get hundreds of meals from them each week to share with our participants who needed prepared meals to get through the pandemic. And that's how it started. I think as we are today, we still get a few hundred meals from the Hollywood Food Coalition every week and deliver these out to people in permanent supportive housing who need them.
Tell us a little bit about what it takes to coordinate efforts with the folks at Hollywood Food Coalition.
It's been really easy to coordinate efforts with the folks at the Hollywood Food Coalition. They've had different staff and volunteers throughout the process that are just really, for lack of a better term, down to do whatever it takes to get folks food. Call them up and say, hey, this is what we need. We send staff over to the various places where they've collected food and been distributing food from in the last year. I know that they've had to find different ways and different places to be because they didn't have the space and to move around. And so we've just kind of flowed together to get what we need from them and to work together.
I know that when I hear from our two guys who deliver food on Sundays, they go to your site, Sherry, and they pick up sack lunches, about 200 a week. That's one of their highlights of the week. They love interfacing with your team there, and they're just fascinated, utterly fascinated with the efforts of your volunteers. I've had a chance to look inside some of those sack lunches, and there's like really cute messages of encouragement and hope, and they're just like really personal. So I think, that also makes a difference in the lives of the people we serve. Tell me why you do this work personally and organizationally, and why it matters to you.
I started off over 20 years ago as a volunteer with the Hollywood Food Coalition because I could see that there was a need to help people who were more visibly living on the street. And just as a member of the community, I didn't want to just drive by the problem anymore. I wanted to say, well, how do I affect it? How do I help? And I happened to find this little organization that was serving a meal every day. And I said, and they let me come in really easily. I brought my kids and I started volunteering in the kitchen and preparing the meal because we do serve a dinner every single night, repurposing all rescued food. So to me, I understood that fundamentally people need a couple of things every day, and food is one of those things. I love the fact that as the Hollywood Food Coalition, we really try to think about food and try and always push to make a more nutritious food, to try and find things that people like, to offer those vegan or vegetarian options along with non-vegan vegetarian options. We try and make sure that we have at our nightly meal a very complete dinner with usually during non-pandemic times, we have a soup every night. We don't do a soup every night now, but we always do starches and roasted vegetables and a protein and a green salad and a fruit salad and a dessert and bread and a drink and anything else we get donated that we can figure out what to do to put into that dinner. We work to create that community connection with them, because then our next step is to get them to get to know us so we can help them partner with people like Housing Works to help them navigate the system and to get into a better space in their own personal lives. As an organization, we really do care about the community and trying to build a resilient community that can offer help all the time just during normal issues. And then as we learned this past year, to scale up in an emergency situation so that we were able to partner with more people to provide more services to organizations who came to us and said, can you help us with food? And people do put in little sayings and jokes and ways to connect with people. And I know that when people open up those lunch bags on Sundays and they see what surprises exist, it is a happy moment for them. And we are happy to make them happy.
Robert, talk to us a little bit about what options our folks have on very, very limited income. I often remind people when I talk about food justice that eating healthy costs.
I think the primary way, at least that the federal government has, decided to support food historically has been through the SNAP program, which provides on average or nationwide less than $5 a day for food. If you can imagine eating on less than $5 a day, you're not eating very much, you're not eating very healthy. In addition to that, we have a lot of folks who are trying to extend beyond that or aren't even eligible for those benefits. Something comes to mind. This happened a couple of years ago. We had regularly been taking one of our participants to the food bank, an elderly Argentinian woman who was undocumented. And she was never satisfied with the food that was available to her at the food bank. And one day I came into my office and there was on my desk a jar of mayonnaise. The mayonnaise had expired 6 months ago. And she had left a message with our office staff to tell Robert, this mayonnaise is expired. This is terrible food. I don't want this. I want better food. And I think that's just indicative of the options that people typically have and indicative of the need that Hollywood Food Coalition is working to fill and in providing more choice to folks and providing healthy options and partnering with organizations to deliver that food to the people who need it.
It's at the center of building communities and really creating lasting friendships and relationships in ways that are just inspiring to me in so many ways. Sherry, how does Hollywood Food Coalition identify agencies and initiatives to take part of?
Oftentimes people are reaching out to us and saying, we have a program, we have this many people in the program, we would like to improve what we're able to do, can you help? And so we do an intake with them to find out what their needs are. And then we work on our end to try and find food sources where we can meet those needs.
So you see, Sherry, without partners like Hollywood Food Coalition and all the work that you and your team and all the collaborative efforts that you all coordinate with, we couldn't do the work we do. And that's why this year, Hollywood Food Coalition is being recognized and honored for the work you do day in and day out. And we will be presenting you with this beautiful wood etching made by an artist who is a friend of Housing Works. Her name is Dolores Carlos. And we will have a beautiful plaque on your award so that you all can always recognize that Housing Works truly appreciates the work that you do, you and your team, and just the difference in the lives of the people that we're serving day in and day out. And so on behalf of Housing Works and our participants and our team and everyone who shows up day in and day out, we just want to say thank you. Thank you to you, Sherry, for leading this amazing organization. And thank you to your team for showing up as well.
We are so grateful to have you because you also, again, as this whole collaborative thing goes on, we know that our clients use your services to get housed and to do the other things that they need so desperately to sort of get to a safe place in their life. So we are so grateful to know you and participate in your services. And that was a beautiful drawing, and we are honored to be recognized as a partner with you.
Sherry, if people want to find out more information about Hollywood Food Coalition, where can they find out more about you?
They can visit our website, which is www.hofoco.org.
HOFOCO, that's HOFOCO.org, right? Wonderful. Sherry Bonanno, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you, Robert, for being here with us. And hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. We love working with you.
Nothing like a good conversation about food. Congratulations again, Hollywood Food Coalition, the 2021 Housing Works Hero Award recipient. Next, let's hear from Shara and Jaden about Empowerment Works.
Hi, my name is Shara Mathis, and I'm a lead support worker in the Central Region. I'm also facilitator for the Healthcare Advancement Ladder, also known as the HEAL program. The HEAL program is Housing Works training program, which is designed to train individuals with lived experience of homelessness to work with people who are experiencing homelessness through outreach and engagement services. Over 2 years, 52 participants have completed the HEAL program.
Hey, my name is Jaden. I work at Housing Works as a life skills advocate in the Central Region. I completed the HEAL program at Housing Works in 2018. Housing Works has hired 10 HEAL participants as permanent employees, myself included. Since 2018, nearly half of the participants in HEAL were placed in employment, and 74% of the participants employed are still employed today, which is great. From program start to hire, participants showed an increase in income about 368%.
Unfortunately, our HEAL programs have been halted due to a lack of funding. However, we continue to provide ongoing services and guidance for our program graduates. We'd love to continue this program that has had such a significant impact on our folks. So we'd like to ask you today, can you please make a donation of any kind to help us provide ongoing support and financial security to the people that we serve? Thank you from all of us at Housing Works.
Arts and enrichment are part of the secret sauce that makes housing work. The LA Department of Cultural Affairs and the California Art Council supported us with grant monies over the past year. Paper mache making classes were virtually held at the beautiful 88th and Vermont Street apartments, where many of the households engaged in an interactive process over a series of several weeks. This project served the 8th District of South Central Los Angeles. 22 households participated in the workshop at 88th and Vermont. Here's a taste of what that looked like.
OMG. I have to say thank you, Joe, for showing us how to bling. That is awesome. This is really awesome. I love it because it actually brought peace. It was soothing. I know it's hard times we're in right now with the COVID and we have to do things virtually, but this showed that you can still do things through virtual. Nice.
Wow. Eileen, say your
so much. Thank you.
I want to see her artwork one more time right on the camera, Eileen.
Yeah. Oh man, that is great.
Nice.
Beautiful color.
Oh, it's beautiful. And this is my bird.
OMG.
Oh. It actually represents a relaxation zone, and I had a lot of fun with it. And this class taught me how to have patience, and now I know what I can do with all the confetti paper. Thank you.
Great. Give you applause. And guess what? I learned a lot. Even teachers learn. And I had a lot of fun because all of you guys and gals really showed up, and I could see the wonderful artists that are in your hearts. And so all I got to do is encourage y'all.
Thank you to the LA Department of Cultural Affairs office for helping to shape that experience for the residents at 88th and Vermont. In another effort, several weeks of Zoom writing classes led by our very own Michael Kearns allowed for folks with history of incarceration to tell their stories about being released, not free. This writing workshop was in partnership with Van Ness House and Mentors, Inc. There were 77 participants who took part in this workshop. They created a remarkable video, Released, Not Free, while they also created a zine, a written word, in collaboration with Art Division. Thank you to the California Arts Council for your support, and thank you, Art Division, on your leadership in helping to create the zine. Housing Works is offering a special opportunity for each of you to learn how to do paper mache. Recycle, renew, restore is the name of the journey you'll venture into in learning traditional Chicano folk art form of paper mache.
Hi, Andy.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. It's so good to be here with you, and I'm so excited to just have this conversation with you today, because really we want to share with people who are interested in learning how to do paper mache an opportunity that we're going to have for them. And one of the ideas that was recently inspired because of a class that you did recently at 88th and Vermont Street Apartments with the tenants in that building consisted of teaching the tenants and the households basically how to do paper mache. What was that experience like for you?
It was a challenge because I was in unknown territory as far as doing a class over the internet, but the class was very patient and we had a lot of fun. It was, I was concerned and greatly relieved that it fit very well and being very family friendly. We had, for all the challenges, we had a wonderful experience, and I'm looking forward to trying it again and trying new ideas and making it a better class.
Right. What we learned at 88th in Vermont is that the majority of the people that live there had no idea what paper mache looked like, what a finished product could look like. And I just want to share with the people who we're hoping will have an interest in participating in your webinar that we're going to be offering in July. Look at this amazing work that Andy has done. Like it's such a vast array of work. There's what did you call them? Flat pieces? Right?
Yeah, these are two-dimensional pieces.
Two-dimensional.
There's 3D, which are actually three-dimensional. And some of them, all the materials on these paintings are paper products. Instead of using wood panels or canvases, I'm using the paper and cardboard. And on some of them, I might start including three-dimensional elements, so like bas relief. I spent my majority of my career as a fine artist and doing murals and being very socially active. It's very stressful, so I started doing paper mache to relax.
Yeah.
You know, my purpose was to communicate to the masses. You know, my view as an artist. You know that we're the messenger, and the whole Chicano mural experience, we're conveying all these important information. But I also realized that my message could be conveyed through humor and through a very humble medium as paper mache.
This year is our 19th anniversary. Housing Works is celebrating 19 years of doing the work that we do. And this year, our theme has to do with this idea of how housing works. Because really, it's more than just having a roof over your head. It's about having the life back in you.
I was in dire straits, and then I got placed in housing. And for the first 2 months, I'm an artist, but I didn't hang anything on these walls because it was like, wow. You know, so me personally, I had a transition. For me, the physical housing, but to come home mentally, I got a lot of help from Housing Works. A couple of my caseworkers were really gung-ho, and they believed in me when I knew what I could do, but I had no faith because I hadn't been able to do art for quite many years. So I'm not only home physically, but I'm mentally and spiritually home. And I think the best thing that I can do is to try and encourage that in other people.
One of our hopes is that people will be inspired to support our annual event by purchasing admission, if you will, to the webinar that is going to take place every Wednesday of July. We're anticipating it's going to look like every Wednesday of July for 2-hour periods. And basically during that time, walk us through what those 2 hours are going to look like for those 4 Wednesdays in July.
They are going to be packed with activity. I will keep everybody engaged, and they'll be challenged. And after a while, it's going to be a challenge of having fun. And that whole thing, you'll go from a piece of cardboard and newspapers and masking tape and a little bit of paste, and you'll construct your first piece. And with each session, you'll take your pieces along the way to where the last session, we're preparing them and painting or using colored tissue paper, depending on how we pigment them. If we do colored tissue, we're going to be using a technique called decoupage. Every student will be able to work at their own pace, and if somebody wants to get a little more fancy while we're doing it, we can. That's where I suggest different ideas, and then I'll have examples of different ideas. So they may want to go to the 99-cent store and buy some things to enhance their piece.
Right. The initial kits are going to be provided by Housing Works. Yes. So if folks want to purchase an admission into this webinar, we're asking for sponsorship. So we have sponsorship information that we will be providing to people who inquire. But basically, we will be providing the starter kit for folks so that there's no excuse. There's no reason to say, oh, I can't do this, because guess what? What we've thought about together is basically they will have the starter kit, so they'll have everything they need to participate in the 4-week class. And if they can't make it to the live webinar, because every webinar will be live with you and they'll be able to interact with you, but if they miss it and they have purchased the admission to it, we're going to record it. So we'll be able to send you the link after the class takes place every week. So this is something you'll be able to keep in your archives and share with others. Thank you, Andy. We will continue to encourage folks to be part of this effort with us, and I hope that anyone who's interested will definitely take into consideration being part of this effort and supporting not only the work that Andy does, but the work that can ultimately contribute to continuing to create communities that are mutually just offering mutual opportunity for growth and transformation ultimately.
This course will be offered via Zoom on 4 consecutive Wednesdays beginning July 7th from 5 to 7 p.m. Tickets for the class can be purchased individually for $150. This includes a box of supplies that will be delivered to your door. Join us and express yourself. You can call our main office at 323-466-0042 for more information, or you can visit our website at www.housingworksca.org. As we continue along, I'd like to pivot into our next piece. Let's warm up with a few words from some of our members of our board of directors.
Hello. This year, Housing Works members of the Board of Directors share with you a few words about our values. These values guide us and our dedicated staff in our everyday work to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to end homelessness for the people we serve. Compassion has a home at Housing Works. In the words of our dear friend Molly, in referring to our friends that we serve, she said, "Believe me, there's a spark in there and it's just waiting for somebody to care enough to find it, to care enough about them, so they'll care enough about themselves to find hope." It is a privilege to be part of Housing Works, with our staff, with our participants, in finding that hope.
Dedication is one of the most important values of Housing Works. And the reason is because we do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to make sure that we house any homeless person and help them all the way through.
I have worked on issues of homelessness in Los Angeles for almost 40 years. For the past several years, I've been very proud to be a member of the board of directors of Housing Works. One of the reasons for that is that more than any other organization with whom I've worked, Housing Works prioritizes the autonomy, the privacy, and the dignity of those they seek to help. That's one of the reasons that Housing Works has been so successful in helping people find housing, stay housed, and move on with their lives.
One of the things that is always so uplifting to me is to see the way that the staff loves the people that they serve. Every time they come to a board meeting and share a story, they do it with such love. And I know that if they didn't have this love, they would not be able to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes. It is when you love someone that you will do anything for them. And I think this is what is so beautiful about the staff and why I'm so proud to be able to come alongside and support them as they work with people who deserve all the love that they can get.
Housing Works believes that every single person is deserving of respect. The staff dedicate themselves to meeting people where they are and respecting their circumstances, their challenges, and most importantly, what they desire for the future. It's one of the many reasons I am so proud to support Housing Works.
The value of collaboration is central to the mission at Housing Works, and I'm grateful for the ways that Housing Works creates partnerships that improve the lives of people experiencing homelessness. With cities like Los Angeles and West Hollywood, with developers and other agencies and local providers, Housing Works is committed to collaborating with others to get people housed and thriving. Thank you to all the staff who work together to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes.
Faith in someone, or faith in a community, or faith in a spiritual experience, any or all of these are at the core of human relationships. The team and participants at Housing Works are people who have faith in one another. They give witness to the community and to the wider world in what it means to give and receive trust. I have been greatly inspired by the safety and care found in the Housing Works community. I join the many people who have a deep and abiding faith in Housing Works.
You make the efforts of Housing Works possible. You are part of whatever it takes. Please join us once again with your generous gift of any amount, as together we do make housing work.
Before we go on, I'd like to acknowledge 3 sponsors who helped make this event a success. We had a titleship sponsorship from the Robert R. Sprague Foundation, an empowerment sponsorship from the Southern California Gas Company, and a retention sponsorship from Pacific Western Bank. To each of our sponsors, we sincerely thank you. Mil gracias for your support. You make housing work. Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking time to join us today. This year marks the 18th year of Housing Works' existence in Los Angeles. Since then, we have made remarkable impact in the lives of the people we serve, those coming off the streets and into housing, and we have also played an instrumental role in system-wide advocacy efforts. And speaking of systems, we're now going to turn our attention to this year's Tom McGinnis Community Leadership Award recipient. The Tom McGinnis Community Leadership Award is an award which has honored Tom's legacy of community building through health system change and creating housing opportunities. This year, we are so pleased to honor our friends at the Economic Roundtable. The Economic Roundtable is a nonprofit urban research organization that creates knowledge for the common good. We are so pleased to call them our friends. They have definitely made an impact in the lives of the people we serve, and we are truly honored to have them here today, honoring them with the Tom McGinnis Community Leadership Award, which we also call the Systems Changer Award. In the spirit of helping each of you understand how housing works, we're going to engage in a really great conversation with the president and CEO of Economic Roundtable, Dan Fleming, and one of their board members, Yasmin Tong. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Yasmin and Dan.
Thank you so much, Selena. It's always been an honor to work with Housing Works. We hold you and your colleagues in the very highest esteem, and we're blown away to receive the Tom McGinnis Award. We're deeply honored that you would select us for this, so thank you.
And Yasmin, I have to disclose to the audience here that Housing Works knows you quite well, because you actually were the board chair of Housing Works a few years ago.
Yes, I'm really happy to be connected with both organizations, and it's really an honor, and I've learned so much from both Housing Works and Economic Roundtable.
So let's dive in and have a conversation about what it is that you all do at ERT, and how is it that you got involved in this work. I want to hear from you, Dan. How long have you been at Economic Roundtable, and why have you been so inspired by doing this work?
The Roundtable spun out from Los Angeles County in 1991, so it's been 30 years that we've been doing this. The time when we spun out was really when LA's economy was collapsing and homelessness was growing. Our involvement began shortly after we spun out. There was a man who washed windshields in our parking lot who I became friends with. He lived on Skid Row. He slept around 4th and Wall Street on Skid Row. And so he organized weekly lunch meetings where we would take he and people he brought with him as a what we called an employment club, and we'd have lunch at Clifton's every week and talk. So I'm still friends with this man who's now almost as old as I am, has a daughter who's been through college. He found housing. But it has been a journey for me to learn the layers and the complexity of homelessness, and also the diversity among people who experience homelessness.
And you've been with ERT since 1991, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's a long time.
It is.
And Yasmin, how long have you been on the board at Economic Roundtable?
I think maybe 2 years.
And I want to talk to you, Yasmin, a little bit about, there's boards and then there's boards, right? And I think that one of the things I suspect, I don't know for a fact, but I suspect that the board at Economic Roundtable is very similar to the board of Housing Works, in that you are movers and shakers and looking to truly tell truth and what deserves to be told when it comes to the stories of people living on the streets and why they're living on the streets.
I think for me, it's just always an incredible learning opportunity. The board members come from different backgrounds. A number of people are full-time in academia. Others come out of labor organizing and advocacy. And then there are others that are public interest attorneys. So I feel like as a board member, we always collect great reports and information from the latest research from the staff, but also to hear the comments and suggestions and recommendations of the board members about how to connect that information to Los Angeles and to the nation.
You're a treasure on our board, Yasmin. The first person there to step up, and you're always invaluable. You have contacts, you have insights, so it's really a privilege to have you on the board, Yasmin.
Well, I feel the same way. Thank you.
So Dan, I want to dive in about to talk about the collaborative efforts that ERT has engaged in over the years, specifically in collaboration with Housing Works.
Well, I think it began with admiration of Molly and Housing Works and then evolved into collaboration. But there was an era when it was a little bit radical and a little bit of an upstart thing to care about homeless people and to advocate for them. And Housing Works was really a leading voice to advocate for people who were homeless and to see them as complete people and to make a really human, deep, lasting commitment to people. I went with your staff into emergency rooms to meet with psychotic patients, to screen them and to house them, and watched your staff talk them down. I watched your staff pick up people with lice in their cars and drive them places. It was always awe-inspiring and humbling to see the commitment that Housing Works staff made to people who are vulnerable and suffering and truly at the margins of humanity.
Talk a little bit to us, Dan, about what some of the initiatives are that you are working on. I know that you're doing a lot of workforce development advocacy, and I would love for you to talk to us about that and any other initiatives you'd like to share with us. And I'd like you to also help us understand how those are birthed, and then how do you decide what agencies you're going to partner with?
Well, first of all, let me say that I don't know any other organization other than Housing Works that makes the kind of commitment you do to stay with people, and how much I admire that. I think our work grows out of the perspective that the deepest form of respect we can give to people is to see their individuality, to see them as unique human beings. Our work began with understanding the cost of homelessness. Our work in that project was around, well, how do we find these people? And we developed predictive screening tools that found these 10% of people, and we looked for them in hospitals, homeless people in emergency rooms. And screened them. And as you said, Selena, a number of these people who you housed died, not too long. It was sad for your staff who'd engaged them and reached out, found housing, gave them the dignity of shelter and of caring. But many of them were at the end of their path. They'd been through very difficult life journeys. Our interest more recently has been, well, what if we found these people on the first day rather than the last day? What if instead of waiting until they were a casualty of the war on homelessness, that we found them earlier when there was more hope, more sense of possibility, more connection to other people? More recently, we've developed screening tools that do that find these high need, high barrier people early in the day. And we're particularly looking at employment as an intervention. And employment's cross-cutting. People need housing, case management, they need skill development, and most of all, they need inner healing. And so it's not a quick fix. It's not just connecting two dots, but it's helping a person rediscover hope, rediscover purpose, rediscover their sense of possibilities and goals for their future. It works for enough people that it can make a dent in homelessness if we make a serious effort in that direction.
Amen. Who funds your research?
Each project we do is separately funded. So the employment, and it's called the Realization Project, is funded by California Community Foundation, Weingart Foundation, and Long Beach City College Foundation.
I've been doing this work in homeless services close to 30 years. I'm coming up on my 27th year doing this work, 17 of which I worked with Molly Lowry. Really deep in the trenches. And I was a frontline worker up until 6 years ago when I became the ED. And one of the things that I constantly talk about in sharing my experience of an executive transition is I talk about learning about all the things I didn't know I didn't know. One of the areas that has become front and center for me is race equity, and especially since George Floyd's brutal murder last year, along with everyone else before him and after him who have continued to be murdered. It took for George Floyd to get murdered in the way that he did for us to finally have an opportunity to talk about things that we didn't have the opportunity to talk about before. And we still have a long ways to go. I think that it's important for us to think about the systems. And when you talk about like this challenge that larger systems do have when there's a thought that comes up for them where they actually might feel that it's too large and it's something they can't change. And I'd like to know what your words of advice or what your words of encouragement would be to systems leaders who show up day in and day out, but might feel fatigued and exhausted by the constant battle of feeling torn down and constantly overpowered by this beast of a system.
Well, I think we need to stand up for a full measure of justice. The issues of racial equity and economic equity and the right to housing, the right to dignity, to respect are all interrelated. For the most part, we try to solve homelessness by giving somebody $221 a month and some food stamps. And that's a guarantee that they're going to be homeless. And this is a series of system failures that lead to homelessness. It isn't just public social services, it's schools, it's mental health, it's healthcare, it's employment, it's systemic racism and discrimination in access to housing, access to jobs, access to college education. So I think we need to see homelessness as not an isolated problem, but the most extreme manifestation of a lot of social problems. And we need to see hope and possibilities and worth in people who are experiencing homelessness and who are wounded.
I agree with Dan, actually. I mean, I think that, while I think we all kind of struggle with our own engagement with different systems and the frustrations of trying to get a bureaucracy to do X, Y, or Z, I mean, I think it's important to see the interconnectedness of all these different issues. We're going to have some major transformation, and I feel like just working on homelessness is not enough. We need to, I guess, working in our lanes, but at the same time, I feel like it's important to have more collaborations. And it's not like any one of us in our work in homelessness or our work in education or whatever can address, can fix the whole thing. But I think we just need to stay in a very sort of holistic point of view about it and again, try to find ways to collaborate and also to help the public understand all these different connections.
I love to surf your website. If you had, you probably do have the ability to know who's looking at your website, but I constantly surf your website because There's so much information there. And so I'd love to just invite our audience to check out your website. And if folks want to learn more about you and the work that you're doing at Economic Roundtable, where should they go?
Our website is economicrt.org. So that's the word economic with the letters RT for roundtable.org. Thank you. Thanks for the chance to put that out.
Yes, Dan Fleming and Yasmin Tong, I can't thank you enough for being here with us today. See this beautiful print here. We will be presenting.
That's extraordinary.
We'll be presenting you and the team with this beautiful print done by our friend Dolores Carlos, who does this as a wood etching. And they are unique, and we will be presenting this to you in person at some point in the next couple of weeks when we can arrange to see you.
We will treasure it. And thank you so much, Selena. We are so honored. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We cannot thank our friends at the Economic Roundtable enough for all they do. Felicidades. Congratulations on being the 2021 Housing Works recipient of the Tom McGinnis Award. Next, we are going to move into a deep discussion about race and equity as we celebrate Dr. Alisa Orduña as the Housing Works 2021 Truth Teller honoree. The power of storytelling helps to shape public perceptions about homelessness. Doing this work, we have learned the power in allowing space for individuals to share their journey. It's often filled with tragedy and trauma. Since the start of the Mobile Integrated Services team in 2008, Housing Works has impacted nearly 700 human lives. One person, one life, one relationship at a time. So how does housing work? Well, a part of that is a person we call a truth teller. Truth tellers are the folks who will bring us closer to the real answers that will provide safe and decent housing for our most vulnerable neighbors. This year, it is my honor, my pleasure, and everything in my heart to honor my friend and esteemed colleague as the 2021 Housing Works Truth Teller Award recipient. Alisa Orduña, Dr. Alisa Orduña, has been a practitioner, policy analyst, collaborator, and thought leader in the urban community development field for the past 25 years. It is her life mission to reimagine neighborhoods as beloved communities where residents of all diversity have a sense of belonging and resources to thrive. During her career, she has worked on the cutting edge of policy formation and change management in neighborhood development and homeless services in both the public and nonprofit sectors in major cities, including Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and Santa Monica, California. Dr. Orduña entered into the homelessness policy field after serving as a program manager at a large family homeless provider in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the People's Emergency Center. She then joined the Office of Councilwoman Janie Blackwell as Director of Special Projects, leading the Neighborhood Transformative Initiative for West Philadelphia, while also coordinating and advancing resources for homelessness services. Alisa returned to her hometown of Los Angeles in 2011, where she has since been at the forefront of homelessness policy and has influenced regional-wide strategies, including the passage of Prop HHH, a city housing bond, and advocating for alternatives to police response to mental health and homelessness-related calls, along with the integration of technology to streamline field-based homelessness outreach programs. Dr. Orduña led this work through prominent roles at the United Way of Greater Los Angeles, the Office of Mayor Garcetti, and recently, the city manager's office in the city of Santa Monica. She has served on the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority ad hoc committee on women experiencing homelessness and on the ad hoc committee of Black people experiencing homelessness. Dr. Orduña is well respected in the field and is a sought after speaker on homelessness, including appearances for the National League of Cities, UCLA, and Otis College. She also sits on the board of directors for the Urban Voices Project and volunteers on the policy committee for the Downtown Women's Center. After a COVID-19 related layoff in May 2020, Dr. Orduña harnessed her experience and launched her very own community development consulting firm, Florence Elise Advancement Network. To enhance her work, Dr. Orduña pursued and completed a Doctor of Philosophy in Depth Psychology at Pacifica Graduate Institute. Her research centered on the creation of an Afro-feminine indigenous cultural framework to create meaning to the phenomenon of Black people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles. She is a graduate of Pasadena High School, Xavier University of Louisiana with a BA in English, the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Public and International Affairs with an MPIA in Social and Economic Development, and Pacifica Graduate Institute with a PhD and MA in Depth Psychology with a specialization in community, liberation, indigenous, and eco-psychology. It is with great honor that we welcome Dr. Alisa Orduña. Also joining us today is Saba Muine. Saba is the Senior Program Manager at the Corporation for Supportive Housing, but Saba also joined the Housing Works Board of Directors this year and will be working closely with us on race equity issues organizationally on a micro, meso, and macro level. So Dr. Orduña and Saba, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you, Selena. Thank you. This is an honor and a pleasure.
Indeed, indeed.
Beautiful introduction. I'm like, ah, thank you.
It's such an honor to know you, Alisa. You know, the Truth Teller Award is not something that we do every year. The last time we did a Truth Teller Award, I want to say it was 2018. And that was the first time that we had a Truth Teller Award. And the recipient was Val Zavala from KCET. And so you're our second Truth Teller. And I couldn't be more excited about presenting you with this honor, because really, we're going to dive into talking about some of the work that you're doing locally, because you are part of the village in this community. And we need you more than I think you even understand. I was thinking about a couple of things, because, and here I am getting chills again, because I'm sitting here with the two of you, and I couldn't be more honored to be engaging in a conversation with the two of you about hard to have conversation. I want to start off by talking a little bit, Saba. A few months ago, you sent me a text message, and in the text message, it said, something in my heart tells me that you need this, and you would really benefit from, like, that this would resonate with you, in other words. And when I clicked it open, it was a podcast, and it was the Good Ancestor podcast. And I can't remember the name of the host. You'll know it.
Lila Saad.
That's right. Lila Saad.
Yeah.
And I was taken. I mean, I listened to the whole segment. It was episode number 39, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
And it was an interview with Dr. Mesa. And it really spoke to the ways she focuses on interviewing people about what they're doing in their life today to be a good ancestor when they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about this as we were coming into this conversation, because Alisa, you live true to that. You live true everything about you and how you move in the world. You are intentional, and you have this grace in being able to tell people the truth without it coming across in a shaming way. You just have this ability to feed the message in a way that it can be heard. And when I think about you, and when I listened to this podcast, I sent it to you because I was like, listen to this.
Oh, there's so much. Like, first of all, I feel so privileged and honored to have the opportunity to be in this setting with the both of you. Just the heart space, like, I feel like our heart spaces are just like so close to each other. And I didn't know that you had sent that link to the podcast to Alisa, so I think that's tremendous. The premise of that podcast is so relevant to the work and the way that you work, Alisa. I know, I feel, because similarly, like whenever we first met, it's like you can feel the presence of all of your ancestors in the room. And that was really centering for me, just having that consciousness of next to me, because it awoke in me this understanding that the visceral feeling of my own ancestors. And I just, in terms of like that, especially from the perspective of African spiritual traditions, and how I think part of the white supremacy project has been to distance us from those traditions and energies. I guess I want to start by asking you what that ancestral calling has been for you in this work. Like, where did it knock on your door? Like, what did it push you to do? And how does that intersect with the work that you are doing around addressing and ending Black homelessness? Just a small question.
Easy. But I appreciate it. And I give honor to the both of you. I give honor to both of your ancestors. I give honor to the ancestors on this land that we now call home, and for their protection, their grace. And may we always honor this home as their home too, as if it is our own. So may we always give respect to it and lift them up. For me, I think I was fortunate to be born in a family, mainly single mom, although my mom remarried, but my mom's family had this tradition of Sunday dinners or holidays where we would travel either to Memphis or Chicago or here in Pasadena. And around, some people may say it's sexist, but I appreciate it as a tradition where the women would most likely be in the kitchen preparing the meals. And, as a child, trying to chop up onions or tomatoes or whatever the task was, without failure, we would get into a discussion about the family and about grandparents and great-grandparents and where we were from. And, if someone had new information, they would share that piece. So as a child, just kind of growing up in this like community of women, my aunts, learning about families and their debates. And I think that was the first permission that you don't forget those that have passed on before you, and that you are part of a living legacy that's moving forward. So you have to honor those footprints that you walk in. And I can say I went through time periods of trying to run away from that more as like a spiritual calling. And, eventually when I came home to LA, finding those roots again. And it was at a critical time. So when I came back in 2011, I was like, where am I going to live? My dad's here. I'm in kind of the South LA area. but I grew up in Inglewood, and then we moved to Pasadena. And I remember driving around parts of South LA. And in my memory from, childhood to when I left at the age of around 17, there were Black auto repair shops, shoe repair shops, different stores. People owned homes. People took pride in the community. There was this always sense of rose bushes and palm trees and the wide streets and sidewalks, and coming home and seeing so much disruption. Now, I was gone during the 1992 civil unrest, and my mom would send newspaper articles, and you come back for Christmas, but you're not here long enough to really look around and see the change and seeing the vacant lots. And having gone to college in New Orleans and going back after Katrina, to me, coming back to LA was coming back after Katrina. And I'm like, where did people go? What happened to the communities? And then working in homeless services, working in downtown, I would see Black people pushing shopping carts or sleeping in tents or on the sidewalk. And I'm like, what happened? It felt like, to me, being gone for a while and then coming back was like a bomb had been dropped on the community, and who you saw were refugees trying to survive through this kind of catastrophe that had happened. And I remember asking in different circles at that time, why are there so many Black faces experiencing homelessness here in LA? What happened to our community? What happened to the people? And the answer was always simplified to mass incarceration. It's because it's disproportionate with mass incarceration. I said, well, that's not a reason. That's a symptom. That's a structural policy. That's a form of structural violence that is creating this. Why is this allowed to happen? Who is benefiting from this disproportionate number of Black people experiencing homelessness? Why aren't we outraged like we were in, if this had been other communities? And, just really questioning, and how come no one's talking about it? And I remember someone in a high position said, we don't talk about race and homelessness. We see it, but that's just not something we talk about. And so pursuing that question, actually going back to school, was I wanted to tell my own story. Having worked on the policy side and trying to make policy work, and trying to figure out ways to modify it so that the effects wouldn't be punitive to if it's working with homeless women or children experiencing homelessness or single adults, and just say, I'm getting burnt out because I'm feeling like we're in hospice care. And I'm wanting to know, how do we revive the community, or do we gracefully disappear? And I think some of the saving grace was going back to school, having the opportunity to learn from colleagues and bring in more of that spiritual component, exposure to Indigenous learnings, particularly coming out of Australia, out of New Zealand, and then even Canada, and some of the reconciliation work that was starting to happen, and the calling out of colonialism and settler culture and, impact. And I was like, okay, and it was just, it sounds very elementary and really ignorant, to be honest. But I'm like, what I heard in the Indigenous movement was this whisper, like, we're still here. Like, everyone talks about us as if we've been banished from the earth, but we're here. We're claiming our language. We're rewalking the land. We have seeds of our Indigenous food groups. And so that woke something up in me. And it was something, because I used to have these dreams of women, Native women crying by like almost a dried out riverbed, and their tears were like regenerating those streams. And I was like, what is this like calling? Where is that well source within me to regenerate and not give up and not want to leave and not agree to this death narrative that our communities are always placed into? And so kind of that accumulation really helped, I think, light fire in me and say, we're still here too. We're not dead yet. Let me start to understand our history and this phenomenon from our perspective. Let me for a second not forgive, not displace, not turn off the impact of white supremacy, but let me just understand it from taking them out of my center and saying, how is this story retold if our people are at the center? How do we see the phenomena? And then how would we address it differently? So that's kind of the path that I've been on. And that's that path, I think, again, that has really motivated me, guided me, and supported me in moments where Selena, you're saying there's some painful moments, and it's how do you see the grace and the beauty in tragedy and trauma? Because we have the privilege of being able to look back, which means that we've survived something. There's a strength of resiliency in us that refuses to die, refuses to burn out. And if we can tap into that within ourselves as leaders within this field, how can we then influence programs and policies and services, or a whole different model that also taps into that resiliency into the people that we serve and honor their form of resiliency, survival, and thriving in the ways that they do. And so that how do we cultivate that and be more supportive instead of looking at people as objects that need to be fixed. That's a mentality we really have to change.
I'm really struck by your journey, and there were so many beautiful images in what you shared, especially those dreams, which I feel like is a form of ancestor communication, and even the ancestors that you named on this land that were speaking to you, and I really appreciate the shift of the gaze from like even that idea that even the phrase Black people experiencing homelessness becomes objectified and categorized. And so I really appreciate the moving away from that and then pivoting to that well of joy, spirituality, culture, resiliency that we have and is with us and inside of us. And I wonder if you could tell us more about quality of that being inside of us. And I know you developed, like a framework around the Oshun, and maybe you could speak to us and kind of respond to that and speaking to us through that lens also, because I think a lot of it is like those things aren't necessarily named sometimes, although they're sensed and understood by those of us who come from those cultures and traditions. So I wonder if you can kind of name some of that being.
Yeah, and I would start, and I'm sure I'll be challenged with it, and that's fine because debates are healthy. I think that connection to nature, that connection to land, to ancestors, and to multiple forms of expression of that, if it's drumming, if it's poetry, if it's dance, that occurs more and more human cultures than we give recognition to. And I really think that period, poor Descartes, who's the philosopher, from the 17th century, gets a lot of the blame for it, but just that whole period of enlightenment where we said we can no longer trust intuition, we can no longer trust nature, we have to create and develop this kind of scientific mind, and as if we could look at the world objectively and have these scientific proofs behind it supporting that objectivity. I think that did a lot of damage across the world. And we know that that's what seeded colonialism and the expansion, and not just domination of nature, but domination of humans. And this sense that we can control what is kind of divinely given or enriched in the world. And that informs so much of the work we do today, from how we practice medicine to how we practice human services to how we practice education. It's all toward this power over and cultivating this kind of group think, a group mentality, with privileging of certain people as leaders, who have a higher, in theory, have a higher consciousness in their narrative than what I think is true. And so my research that I did for the dissertation was so important to me that too often when we look at studies around homelessness, we look at the people that are in homelessness, have exited or experiencing it. And I said, well, how come we're never looking at those involved in the homeless services system? Whereas workers in the system were agents of a system that we never, it's almost like this invisible hand that never is held accountable. And so through the work, and it was risky because it was a little twist. I said, well, I want to call out anti-Black biases among, regardless of your race, culture, gender, in the homeless services sector through this design. And so the design was a day of workshops around African-centered themes, African cultural themes, and actual African practice of African culture, from mask making to dance to singing. And if I could put it this way, it was that release of whatever blockage that was disconnecting people from their own stories and from their own emotions somehow was loosened. I won't say it was removed, but for that day it was loosened so that this incredible amount of cascade of stories came out, that people were making connections, that things they hadn't thought about, or it gave them another framework of which to organize the stories that maybe they had heard, but organize them in a different way. So it wasn't about shame or punitive or blame, but they were able to say, wow, from that, I can now understand this, or from seeing the story this way, I can now forgive myself, a family member, community, etc. So that's why I say, definitely think, and I give credit to the African spiritual practice that I do, which is the Ifa tradition among the Yoruba people, for giving me this cosmology of a way to relook at the world and see what resonates. I think what it taught me is that there's this greater application that no matter what your indigenous culture is, that you have one and that you have to reclaim it, and that we need to move away from arts kind of being like a hobby to arts being a form of liberation and memory and connection. Homelessness is our collective shadow. It's us as a society that have said, for whatever reason, you don't belong here. You know, so we are banishing that, and to make those reconnections so that we stop objectifying and we can start to see people as human. We need the liberation arts and practices and different ways of understanding human relationships to be just as valid as what I could pick up in a textbook at one of the colleges today.
Yes, yes, please. Can we have that?
But yes. You know, and I have to say that's what I appreciate about the both of you is, one, Selena, is that you are a truth teller as the leader of this organization and in this field. You come at it from this work, and I think that's what guides your decision making around, is this program, is this funding, is this contract, is this way of demands that's being placed upon us really going to make the impact that we want? We want to see lives live. We want to see people thrive. We want to see the ancestors dancing in circles around joy and not crying, saying, did we go through all of these hard times for this? I always appreciate you and the boundaries you set and the way that you move and the way that you guide this work. And I know there's sacrifices that you make to do that because it's not always honored or recognized by our current funders. And Saba, you too, the way you have propelled this racial equity work, you know, from the work that you do with the group of people with lived experience, to how you move at conferences, to how you are influencing the research work. And again, you recognize we need a new language. We need a new way to talk about these dynamics that are happening so that we move toward a new paradigm. And so I think I always appreciate both of you because it's like we validate each other.
Yeah, and in many ways, I see us all as pioneers, really, just from that centering of, I know for me, like with centering the arts and working in the arts and being an artist, and whenever, you know, you bring that into the room or you say the word love in a professional space, it's sort of like, oh, you know, but yet at the same time, our beings are yearning for that. And that is the calling that we all are conscious of. I mean, I'll say that it's a form of activism, really, to center that human wellness and center of rich ancestral wisdom, that thing of, like you were saying, those indigenous knowing, the indigenous knowing that is not valued by the culture, the white supremacy culture, but then it is so deeply wanted and needed. So I feel that too, and I'm really grateful for our togetherness in this. And I'm really happy that you named indigenous practices, that we all have them. And I think that is a real opportunity for healing. And so, like, the work that you do, Selena, around just always kind of centering the arts in serving people who have experienced the trauma of homelessness, I think is really, really, really rich. And I think both of you have really named that piece as central and something that we need to tend to more deeply. How do you envision, Elisa, like tending to that, to what we are naming more deeply as a system? I know Selena always talks about the meso and the interpersonal, but then the systemic and macro. Like, what are some visionings around that? Like, I'm seeing like circles of dance. Like, what are our senses?
Food.
Yeah. Food, yes.
Pay for food, like contracts pay for food.
Oh, I everything that as you were describing, like reimagining that community, right? I think one of the hardest things for me as I'm ending my 6th year as ED here, I'm finding myself like struggling with my spirit, not feeling in alignment with being true to the people that need us. We're showing up for them. We're doing amazing work, but we're not doing what could be really transformational around cultural humility. We're doing phenomenal work. We're doing hard work, but there's like, if we got really honest, we'd have to, like, we need to say the fact is there's a huge component of the work we do that needs to be done.
It's when I hear you say that. So one, I just want to offer, I named my consulting firm the Florence Elise Advancement Network. And so Florence Elise, Florence was my paternal grandmother, Elise my maternal grandmother. So they keep me honest by naming it that. But the network piece was so important to me because it was this kind of like ego checker to say, you can't do this work alone, but how do you, in the work, value the collaborative relationships and finding kind of the people that you align value-wise, vision-wise, pulling various levels of expertise to kind of pull in so that we're constantly moving as a network versus as an individual. And so I think as a leader, for you, it's like, how do we as a community come more around you to provide that support that you need to fulfill your vision? If we're truly about honoring the 500,000+ lives that just died of COVID, not alone gunshots, cancer, car accidents, etc., we've got to do something different. And it feels like pieces are there. And it's like, how do we provide it? And Selena, you said food, and I know we've had conversations before, like doing gardens and stuff more at your work. And I was talking to a friend in Tennessee, and I was sharing, we were talking about gardening. I said, do you believe at one point public gardening in LA was almost illegal? I just think this moment, if we are strategic, if we can take a few weeks off to decompress when we need to, and then regenerate and come back, and again, recognize that it isn't the I, it's the we. And even if it's just, it starts off with 5 of us, let's figure out something and work together and surround each other in support and just make it happen.
Yeah, I feel really honored to be part of that web and that network, and just moving away from the idea of us as people in the sector kind of managing and dictating, but more so standing in a circle with community and acting as people to support a community process. And Selena, thank you for, the naming of food as one of those elements. And then Elisa was like, oh yeah, I worked on something like that. I know that was in my community. And so it's not as though we don't have these practices, like you said, and approaches. And I think the vision and continuing to dream and do that with community is why is what inspires me in the work more than anything.
I want to show you a print.
Oh my God.
There, but
beautiful.
This is yours is at the framing house.
Oh,
and it's going to have a plaque that has Dr. Elisa Orduña, Truth Teller 2021.
Did you sign it though? Did you sign it? I want your signature on it.
Okay.
Yes. And beautiful.
And the print is by a good friend of Housing Works. Her name is Dolores Carlos. It's a wood print.
And look, it's the garden.
Yeah.
There it is. Oh,
and the
my
community, the network.
The network. Oh, I'm gonna honor it. Oh my God.
So
I'm looking so forward to what we all will do, like in the days and the months and the years to come. And I'm just so honored by you, the both of you, your board and your staff, and really the constituents that you serve. I just want to thank them for their stories, their examples of resilience, and the courage they give us to continue this work, this advocacy or this policy or whatever it is that we're doing to create a human society again.
That's right. That's right.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I hope that tonight's storytelling inspires you to make a financial contribution towards our efforts. We cannot do this without you. Please visit our website at www.housingworksca.org to donate. As we bring this event to a close, I'd like to leave you with this. Housing Works will continue to work to dismantle the oppressive and traumatic systems that perpetuate poverty and marginalization of people of color. We promise to work collectively within the sector to prompt discussion and advocacy efforts to address the normalized expectation of submitting to a system of funding streams that directly feeds into an oppressive and traumatic system for both the workforce and the people we serve. Housing Works will continue acknowledging that the fish are sick because the groundwater is infected and toxic. It's time to clear the mud, lift the fog, and make way for each other. One life, one person, one relationship at a time. Truly doing whatever it takes for as long as it takes. Have a good evening.